You know that feeling when you're climbing, but it seems like no one even knows there's a mountain. You wake up, show up, hold yourself together, and keep choosing the harder, honest path while the world scrolls past you. No applause. No. I see how hard you're trying. Just bills to pay, memories that sting, promises you're still honoring, and a silence that sometimes feels like a verdict. If no one witnesses my growth, does it even count? Tonight, I want to sit in that silence with you, because from the lens of Carl Jung, what you're walking through is not failure, not invisibility, but initiation. Every true transformation begins when the old structures quietly dissolve, the roles you played to be loved, the masks you wore to belong, the noise you used to outrun yourself. One day they stop working. Friends feel distant. Conversations feel shallow. The environments you once bent yourself to fit start scratching against your soul. So you wonder, what's wrong with me? Maybe nothing is wrong. Maybe this is the moment your inner life refuses to be background scenery. Jung called this descent into your own depths the beginning of a sacred journey, a crossing from the persona, the polished surface, toward the self, the deeper, unshakable center of who you are. And that crossing rarely comes with clapping or comfort. This video is for the nights when you feel untouched by every motivational quote, unseen in every room you enter, and dangerously close to shrinking yourself back into who you used to be just to feel approved again. Stay with me. If you're here, it's because some part of you has already refused to abandon yourself even when everyone else felt distant. Together, we'll walk through 7 quiet, uncompromising steps drawn from Jungian psychology. 7 inner shifts that allow you to rise without begging for rescue, to stand without selling your soul, and to become the kind of person whose strength is real, rooted, and undeniable, even when no one is watching. Your life does not need an audience to be holy. It needs your presence. There comes a season in every soul's life when the familiar begins to fade, when laughter feels distant, conversations lose their color, and the world you once knew starts to echo back in a foreign tongue. Everything on the surface looks unchanged, yet deep inside something is quietly unraveling. That quiet is not your enemy. It's your beginning. Most people run from loneliness thinking it's proof that they've failed at connection. But in Jungian psychology, solitude isn't the absence of love, it's the threshold of awakening. Jung called this the night sea journey, a descent into the unseen waters of your own psyche, where the light of the old self disappears so a truer one can emerge. Loneliness is the first gate. It's the moment your soul begins to peel away from the persona, the social mask that helped you survive, but now suffocates your growth. The ache you feel when no one gets you isn't a curse. It's the vibration of your deeper truth pulling you home. It's the universe whispering, "You're done pretending." I once met a man who, after losing his long-term partner, found himself terrified by the silence of his own apartment. At first, he filled it with noise, podcasts, dates, endless work. But one night, the power went out, and there was nowhere left to hide. In that darkness, he began writing letters to himself, letters he never sent. Months later, he told me that silence became my teacher. I stopped waiting for someone to hear me. I started listening. That's what loneliness does. It strips away distractions until you can finally hear your soul's language. It teaches you discipline, not the kind born from control, but the kind born from devotion, showing up for yourself when no one else does. Every meal you cook for one, every journal entry written in the dark, every night you survive without collapsing into distraction, becomes a brick in the cathedral of your strength. Picture a tree in winter, no blossoms, no applause. Just roots digging deeper into the cold earth, preparing for spring. That's you right now, your roots stretching inward, quietly, powerfully, invisibly. Jung once wrote, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos." So when life feels stripped bare and silent, remember you are not being punished. You're being prepared. Every season of solitude is your soul learning how to stand on sacred ground alone, but never abandoned. After walking through the long corridors of loneliness, another truth begins to surface. What drains us most isn't solitude itself, but the silent expectation that someone else should come and fill it. For years, many of us have mistaken connection for rescue. We reach for messages that never come chase approval from people who can't understand us and measure our worth by how others respond. But what if all of that reaching is simply the echo of a child within, still waiting for someone to say, "You matter. I see you"? Carl Jung once wrote that loneliness doesn't come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate what feels most important. Emotional dependency grows out of that inability. When we depend on others to make us feel safe, every silence feels like rejection. Every delay feels like abandonment. I remember a young woman from a therapy group who once said, "If my partner doesn't text back, I start to disappear." Her words weren't about romance. They were about recognition. As a child, whenever she cried, her parents told her to toughen up. Her nervous system learned emotions are dangerous. Silence means, "I'm not loved." And for years, she kept looking for someone to prove otherwise. But the truth is, no one else can carry that task forever. When we hand over the keys to our emotional well-being, we also surrender our freedom. Emotional maturity begins the moment you become your own soothing presence. When pain rises, you pause instead of panicking. You breathe. You place a hand on your heart and whisper, "I'm here. I won't leave myself again." It sounds simple, almost childlike, but that act rewires everything. It's how the self begins to reclaim the ground that the anxious ego once gave away. Being your own safe place doesn't mean you stop loving others. It means you stop asking them to prove your worth. You can still fall in love, still connect deeply, but your balance no longer depends on another person's consistency. When someone leaves, you grieve, but do not collapse. When someone goes silent, you listen without losing yourself. In Jung's view, this is a sacred step in individuation, the shift from emotional fusion to autonomy, from seeking mirrors to becoming your own reflection. He said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." That privilege starts here, when you stop chasing rescue and begin becoming your own sanctuary. There's a moment after you've learned to stand alone and soothe your own pain when a subtler shadow begins to appear, the voice that still whispers, "Why is this happening to me?" That voice can sound reasonable, even comforting. It's the tone of self-pity dressed as reflection. You might not even notice it at first. It slips into your words when you sigh, "I'm so tired," or "No one ever understands." But every time you repeat those phrases, you quietly hand your power away. You reinforce the oldest illusion of the ego, that you are powerless. Carl Jung called this the victim shadow, the part of the psyche that feeds on complaint to avoid responsibility. It's clever because complaining feels like an action. You talk, you vent, you explain. But nothing moves. You stay in the same emotional weather, waiting for life to apologize before you begin again. But the universe doesn't respond to complaints. It responds to participation. There was once a woman I knew who spent months grieving a betrayal by her closest friends. Every conversation circled back to the story of how wronged she was. One evening, she wrote in her journal, "If no one were here to listen, would I still tell this story?" Her pen stopped. That was the night her healing began. She realized that her words had become a cage. From then on, she decided to write only about what she wanted to learn from the pain, not what others had done to cause it. And slowly her energy returned. That's what happens when you step out of the victim's shadow. You reclaim the energy that self-pity had stolen. You stop asking, why me? And begin asking what? Now Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Every complaint is the unconscious pulling your strings, keeping you small. But every small act of accountability, every time you choose creation over blame, cuts one of those strings. Think of a stone lying at the bottom of a river. The water grinds it endlessly, day after day. To the stone, the current might seem cruel. Yet over time, that same current polishes its surface until it shines. The water never meant to punish it was shaping all along. Life works the same way. When you stop cursing the current and start swimming with it, the world doesn't change, you do. Because strength is never born in complaint. It's born the moment you decide to participate in your own becoming. There's a quiet test that arrives once you stop complaining and start acting the silence of being unseen. You show up, you give your best, you keep your promises, and yet no one claps, no one notices. You begin to wonder if effort even matters when it isn't witnessed. This is the moment when most people quit. Not because the work is too hard, but because invisibility feels unbearable. But from the Jungian lens, this is where your ego begins to dissolve, where your worth must stop depending on applause and start flowing from the self. Carl Jung said that the most terrifying act is to accept oneself completely, because when you truly validate yourself, you stop needing others to confirm your light. You become your own witness. I once met a nurse who'd spent 10 years working overnight shifts saving lives that most people never saw. No one ever says thank you, she told me. And for a while that broke me. But one morning after another sleepless night, she sat in her car and whispered, I know what I gave tonight. I saw it. She began keeping a notebook, a private archive of every small act that reflected her integrity. And over time, that became her sanctuary, her proof that she mattered even when the world stayed silent. External validation is like a spark. It burns bright, then fades. Self-validation is a flame that doesn't go out because it's fed from within. In Jung's framework, this marks the shift from the dependent ego to the integrated self, the part of you that acts not for recognition but from truth. You no longer work to be seen. You work because it's who you are. And when you move from that place, something extraordinary happens. Even without spotlight or praise, your presence begins to radiate steadiness. You don't chase significance, you embody it. Think of the myth of Cassandra, the prophetess cursed to be right yet never believed. Her story isn't just tragedy, it's courage. She kept speaking even when no one listened because truth for her was not performance, it was devotion. Likewise, your worth isn't proven by who believes in you. It's revealed by how faithfully you stand by what you know to be real. When you start seeing yourself clearly, flaws, strengths, contradictions, all of it, you become untouchable in the best way. Criticism loses its sting, praise loses its control, and peace quietly takes its place because you've stopped outsourcing your value. You've become your own mirror, your own approval, your own light. Even after you've found your inner strength and stopped depending on praise, life will still find ways to make you fall. And often it happens right after you start to feel steady, just when you think you've finally mastered yourself. One mistake, one betrayal, one unexpected collapse, and suddenly you're on your knees again. But falling doesn't mean you've lost what you've built. It means the universe is inviting you to go deeper. Carl Jung once said that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Failure from that perspective isn't a punishment, it's illumination. Every stumble throws light on the parts of you still waiting to be healed, the hidden pride, the unspoken fear, the small voice that still longs for approval. The fall doesn't destroy you, it refines you. I once met a small business owner named Elena. She poured her soul into her bakery, only to have her partner steal her savings and vanish. For months, She couldn't even walk past the storefront. I thought I was done, she told me. But then one night, instead of asking, "Why me?" she asked, "What is this showing me?" That single shift changed everything. She realized she'd ignored her intuition for years, outsourcing decisions she knew she should have made herself. So she started again alone this time. Smaller shop, fewer customers, but more clarity. I used to chase success, she said. Now I follow honesty. Failure burns away the unnecessary. It humbles the ego and reveals the strength of the self. Like the mythical phoenix, you are reborn through fire, not despite it. Every time you rise without rescue, you build spiritual muscle. Every time you act without applause, your roots deepen. Science even echoes this truth. When we fail, the brain's circuitry lights up, pain meets awareness. But when we take even a small step forward, that same brain releases dopamine, the chemistry of hope. Action, not despair, repairs the spirit. So if you've fallen recently, don't call it defeat. Call it purification. What's burning isn't you. It's the shell that's too small for who you're becoming. Strong souls are not forged in safety. They're shaped in the fire they refuse to escape. And when you finally rise again, not to prove, not to impress, but to live from truth, your presence itself becomes flame. The kind of light that doesn't ask permission to shine. Once you've risen from failure's ashes, there's a subtler trial waiting one that doesn't roar with emotion, but whispers with fatigue. It's the test of showing up when you don't feel inspired, when your heart feels empty, when every step forward feels like walking through fog. This is where many stop because we've been conditioned to believe that passion should carry us. But Carl Jung taught that not emotion is what real transformation is built on. Emotion is a wave. It rises, crashes, disappears. Will is the tide it endures. True freedom begins when your actions stop depending on how you feel. Jung once wrote that the will is the organizing energy of the psyche, the bridge between what you know and what you actually live. Anyone can act when they're inspired, but the mature soul acts even when they're not because they've chosen alignment over excitement. I once met a single father who worked night shifts and still woke up at dawn to study architecture. When I asked him how he kept going, he said, "I don't wait for motivation. I promised my son he'd see me build something." That's not inspiration, that's integrity. Discipline doesn't mean suppressing your feelings. It means not letting them rule your direction. The ego thrives on mood swings. It loves the drama of "I'll do it when I feel ready." The self moves quietly, steadily, without asking permission. In modern psychology, this is the muscle of grit, the art of staying when the spark fades. When you choose to act without inspiration, you're not betraying your soul. You're training it to stay awake even when light is scarce. Think of a sailor steering through a night without stars. The ocean is endless, the compass flickers, the mind begs for rest. But if the sailor keeps the wheel steady, morning will come. That's what it will look like. It's the sacred agreement between your consciousness and your destiny. I will not stop showing up for who I said I'd become. Some days your victory is not in doing something grand, but in doing something small. Writing one paragraph, taking one walk, speaking one truth. Because consistency, not emotion, builds the bridge from potential to embodiment. Jung once said that freedom of will is the ability to do gladly what must be done. Gladly, not resentfully. Because when your actions serve something higher than mood, even the mundane becomes sacred. So if today you feel drained, uninspired, unseen, remember this: you don't need passion to keep going. You just need a promise worth keeping. And if you honor that promise day by day, you'll discover that willpower is not the absence of feeling. It's the quiet flame that keeps you moving toward the self when emotion has gone to sleep. There comes a moment after all the effort, all the discipline, and all the silent victories, When you realize no one really knows what you've walked through. No one saw the nights you cried, the mornings you rose anyway, the 1,000 tiny choices that rebuilt your life. And that realization can ache more than failure itself. Because even now, part of you still hopes that someone will finally look at you and understand. But Carl Jung once wrote that your visions will become clear only when you look into your own heart. That's because understanding from others is a reflection. Understanding from within is illumination. The truth is, no one can ever fully understand you, and that's not a tragedy. It's liberation. Each soul's path winds through landscapes only it can walk. Even the most empathetic person can only meet you where their own light reaches. The rest of your journey is meant to be walked in sacred privacy. A few years ago, I spoke with a painter named Noah. After years of chasing trends and painting for approval, he found himself burnt out hollow. So he left the city, rented a cabin near the sea, and stopped showing his work online. For the first time, he painted with no audience in mind. When I stopped trying to be seen, he told me I finally saw myself. Months later, his art transformed raw alive, radiating something words couldn't describe. And ironically, that was when a gallery discovered him. Not because he was chasing visibility, but because authenticity has a frequency the world can't ignore. That's the paradox Jung spoke of. The more you stop seeking outward validation, the more your inner light begins to attract what's truly meant for you. When you cease to beg the world to see you, you become a quiet magnet for everything that resonates with your truth. Not everyone will understand you. Some will misinterpret you. Others will project their fears onto you. But the self doesn't require comprehension, it only requires fidelity. When you stop asking, who will understand me, and start asking, how can I remain true to myself, your energy shifts. Confusion turns into clarity. Longing turns into presence. Real love, real connection, doesn't need full understanding. It needs full acceptance. The kind of acceptance that starts with yourself. When you finally embrace your contradictions, your strength and your softness, your clarity and your chaos, you stop chasing belonging. You become it. Think of a lighthouse standing on the edge of a restless sea. It doesn't move, doesn't shout, doesn't beg the waves to notice. It simply shines. And by shining, it guides others home. You too are meant to stand in your own light, not to prove, not to convince, but simply to be. Because the ones who are meant for you will feel your presence without explanation. They won't need to understand your journey, they'll recognize it. So if the world feels distant, if no one truly gets you breathe, you are not unseen. You are simply walking a path too sacred for the crowd. And somewhere in the silence of your own heart, the voice of the self keeps whispering, you are enough. You always have been. Just keep walking home. There's a quiet point beyond the struggle, beyond the seeking, where everything starts to make sense, not in words, but in presence. You look back and you see the pattern. Every night of loneliness, every tear you hid, every time you had to soothe yourself in silence, they weren't random. They were the sacred architecture of becoming. What you've just walked through are not 7 separate lessons. There are 7 movements in a single symphony, the soul's long pilgrimage from shadow to self. At first, loneliness came to strip away distraction. Then learning to comfort yourself built the inner ground. Stopping the complaint gave you responsibility. Self-validation taught you sovereignty. Failure forged your resilience. Willpower revealed your devotion. And finally, the need to be understood transformed into inner peace. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming whole, of uniting the parts of you that once fought each other, the child and the adult, the shadow and the persona, the fear and the courage. You are no longer chasing light or running from darkness. You've learned that both belong to you. The self is not a destination. It's the awareness that every part of you, even the ones you once tried to exile, was always a fragment of the same divine design. Integration doesn't mean perfection, it means honesty. It means looking at your reflection flaws and all and saying, "This is me, still becoming." I once heard a teacher say that growth is like climbing a spiral staircase in the dark. You pass the same places again and again, but from higher ground. What used to break you now teaches you. What once felt like punishment now feels like initiation. And that's how transformation truly works, not through grand revelations, but through the steady rhythm of choosing truth over comfort every single day. You've learned that being alone doesn't make you empty, it makes you real. That no applause can define your worth. That falling only burns away the false. And that your will, quiet, stubborn, faithful, is the hand of the self guiding you home. Now, when you walk into the world, you don't need to announce your strength. You simply are it. Your presence becomes the proof. Like a lantern lit from within, you carry both your shadows and your light with grace. You don't seek to escape the darkness anymore, you walk with it, and because of that, others will see you glowing and think it's the stars, but you'll know it's your soul. It's the light you built in the dark. If you've made it here, if you've stayed through every silence, every reflection, every quiet truth, thank you. Not just for watching, but for feeling, for walking this far inside yourself. Because this video was never really about becoming stronger. It was about remembering what was always there, the calm beneath the chaos, the light beneath the noise. You've seen by now that strength doesn't mean being unbreakable. It means being authentic, honest enough to fall to feel and to rise again with integrity. You've learned that no one needs to rescue you, that no one else can tell you who you are, because you've already met the only person who can, the self that has been waiting for you behind every loss, every moment of doubt, every night. So tonight, take a moment to honor yourself, not for what you've achieved, but for what you've endured and transformed. The quiet resilience that no one else saw, that was your initiation. You didn't need an audience. You only needed courage. And if something in this journey has spoken to your heart, share it. Not as a performance, but as a signal. Because somewhere out there, another soul is still trying to find their way through the same fog you once walked through. Maybe your voice will be the small light that keeps them going. If this message has met you where you are, I'd love to know. Leave one word in the comments, still. A small reminder that even when no one stands beside you, you still stand with yourself. And if you want to keep walking this path of depth healing and self-discovery, you're welcome to stay here with us. Subscribe not for algorithms, but as a quiet promise to yourself to keep growing, to keep remembering, to keep becoming who you truly are. Because this isn't the end. It's the beginning of the real journey, the journey of living as your own light, steady, clear, and free.